Okay, I'm not interested in studying white people. I'm sorry, I'm just interested. There's enough other people doing that. Yeah, no disrespect, but I'm interested in studying black people, of the people, and for the people. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is the MIAFA, the African Holocaust, and what happened to us. Then about the psychic terrorism. Please put it. Yes, why Africans can have post-traumatic slave syndrome, yeah? And what I call recovering from enslavement and colonization trauma, because we weren't slaves, we're enslaved. And we're still in recovery. We're still in recovery because daily assaults happen on our sense of self. We have microaggressions, macroaggressions, so we're not post anything, we're still there, yeah? And as my fellow colleague mentioned about colonization, it isn't just the enslavement, but also the colonization. So there's the double whammy. My parents are from Jamaica, and they're always complaining about the situation in Jamaica, but they were both enslaved and colonized, the double whammy. And my parents gave the best years of their life building up this country and left children in there without a generation of parents, yeah? So we've got to think about the legacy of that. And then talk about African-centred therapies, because what we don't want is black people being led into therapy on the NHS, which re-traumatises them because it doesn't know anything about us. So our therapies need to be developed by us, for us, and then the implications for healing and wellness. Okay, so where we're saying that, why do some Africans have post-traumatic slave syndrome? Yeah, not all of us. So there was a bomb a couple of years ago in Russell Square, and people who would have witnessed that, some of them would have been traumatized, but some of them wouldn't. Yeah, so it's not everybody. But when we're finding as black people we're overrepresented in all the wrong places and underrepresented in all the right places, something's going wrong in our community, and something has happened to black people across the world that is leading to our failure and us not reaching our full potential, yeah? So we're talking about the African Holocaust and the shattered consciousness that it gave us, the psychic terrorism. So when they did lynching of black people, they could have done it in private, but they did it in public as a warning to other black people to say, if you step out of line, if you progress too much, this is what we'll do to you. And then there's the epigenetics, in terms of how trauma can affect the next generation. It can actually change the DNA to say that trauma is passed on through the generations, as well as you traumatize parents, parenting traumatized children, so it goes on within the culture. And then there's the effect on the concept of self of communities colonized. So it's about trying to be white for social privilege and trying to be white for advancement. So trying to hide your African self and lessen expression of your African self just to get by because you're reinforced with the more European you are. Yes. So what we're ending up doing is that we're damaging our psyche just on a daily basis just to fit in. And then what we're finding is that Eurocentric psychotherapy isn't healing enough of us quickly enough if we're overrepresented, like Claire said at the start, 5 times more likely to be restrained, to be part of the mental health system. We need ways of making that stop. So the understanding of self needs to take into account the effects of eumelanin. Do people know what eumelanin is? Yeah, it's the chemical pigmentation that causes the dark skin, the actual representation of Negroid features in terms of hair. And the thing about melanin, it affects even the way that black people vibrate. So you could see a cutout of a black person and a white person dancing, and you'd know the black person just by how they're vibrating, how they're moving, yeah? So melanin has an effect. So what we're saying is that black people aren't white people with a coloured-in face. We're black people and we're different in our makeup. And the type of therapies need to take that into account, as well as our experiences that bring us into therapy need to take that into account. So yeah, the impact of culture and also the assessment tools that are used in therapy we need those that are developed on black people, by black people, that are looking at things like colorism, that are looking at black racial identity, that are looking at progression of black people and our particular barriers and traumas. So what I'm saying is that therapies which take into account these issues are already here. Yeah, you've got emotional emancipation circles, and if you want more information about that, you can get in touch with me afterwards and I can give you details. That's about preventative wellness models for getting the community healing itself, to say that when the next trauma happens, we have resilience built into our community. There's optimal therapy, Untu psychotherapy, Mayat therapy, Ubuntu therapy, for people who do traditional training courses in psychotherapy, counselling. They're not taught about these therapies, but a lot of these therapies were established in the 1980s, 1990s, and they're still going. So we need to demand on the NHS psychotherapy, but also to demand the training centres that train those clinicians to actually train them in black psychology and black psychotherapy. Okay, so when you're operating from an African-centred perspective in therapy, therapy comes about using the best of African culture as a template for living and transformation. It becomes about growing into the fullness of oneself rather than trying to hide oneself because of what your white overseers or what your white colleagues or what your white bosses may think of you and the oppression that they may put on you for that. It's about saying that I can survive without that, and some of it may be us doing our own businesses and our own systems outside of the institutions that we work for. It's about liberation and illumination of the spirit and inspiration, not manipulation. So how do we kind of inspire people to be their best, yeah, to find out what they're born to be, what they're here for? And elements of this approach can be applied to other cultures as well. Why free on the NHS? Well, why not? As black people, we pay our taxes. Yes. Why shouldn't we get a form of psychotherapy that reflects our issues? And we're owed reparations anyway, so why not put it into something that can not just take away the illness, but build up resilience and also get us to be the best of ourselves and improve ourselves? And I said that I'm not interested in white people's issues, but I am in a bit, because when you heal the oppressed, you also heal the oppressor as well, yeah? So you can even look at it from the point of view as why should white people be spending their taxes on putting black people in prison and putting black people in the mental health system? It would help them if we helped ourselves as well. So what I'm saying is that when we come to the votes, vote yes to therapies for post-traumatic slave syndrome and recovering from enslavement and colonisation trauma on the NHS. Because it's the only way to get ourselves healed and get ourselves transformed and operating from the best of ourselves. And there's support systems to support that. There's the Association of Black Psychologists, which have their mission to aid the psychological liberation of people of African ancestry throughout the world. It's not about removal of illness, it's about liberation of the spirit. It's about advancing African psychology to address the significant problems affecting the black community, empowerment of the African character, and enlivenment and illumination of the African spirit, yeah? It's that African spirit that got our ancestors through colonisation and through enslavement. And that African spirit is in us as well, but we just need to find it and let it out. So to conclude, therapists need training in understanding the African self, or they're not healing the whole person. It's not about African-centred psychotherapies or Eurocentric. It's about having the choice to choose from the best psychotherapies for that person in the room, which can include African-centred psychotherapies. Further research is needed on a black British population, but in the same way when cognitive behaviour therapy came across from America to England, and then they did studies in this country, we can do further studies on a lot of these African-centred approaches in this community as well. So, and is there enough time for kind of like any questions, answers, comments? Not yet. Not yet. Okay, I'm going to leave you with that. Okay, thank you.